But at some point, I'll have you grab your waxers, and I'll sort of go through all of this with you, because, today we're gonna get started. By Wednesday, we want to start to really have kind of your projects more or less wrapped up, okay? So, and maybe in saying that, what I would say is that if you decide that you want to do something that we haven't seen yet, you have to, move along so that, by next Monday, probably by next Monday is when we're gonna really get quite serious about, the pieces being done, having the plaster set, and then a week from Wednesday is when we're actually gonna be doing the investment of the plaster. So that's like the drop dead date. So like between now and Wednesday, it'd be great if you could finish it up, but if you needed a little bit more time, that's okay. By Monday, you need to have these boxes done, and then a week from Wednesday, we're actually gonna wear your dirty clothes, okay? Because there's gonna be plaster everywhere, and we're gonna be filthy by the end of, like me, myself included, we're all gonna be filthy by the end of class, because we're gonna be investing in journals. To move the process forward from this point, we need to think about a couple things. First of all, adding the sprues and the vents. We talked a little bit about that. Sprues are the, I talked about, having, if this is your artwork, as it was for me, if this is my art, I have to sort of immerse this in plaster. You have to plaster all the way around it, and you have to be able to, first of all, get the wax out when the wax melts, right? And then you have to be able to get the bronze in when you pour it. And so you need to have a cup on it, which is a sprue. The cup is called a sprue, which is, I had talked about that being about the diameter, like this kind of diameter, the diameter of a pop bottle, or I even have a nice little mold here that you can use. So feel free to cast yourself some sprues right here if you want. You can just, the wax thing's on, you can go ahead and pour these, and you got some great ones. But like I said, you can also just use the top off a pop bottle and just cut that and use that. I actually prefer that for myself because it just sticks on the wax so nicely. It actually works really well. But you wouldn't want to get that sprue stuck on there. In addition to which, some of you are going to have situations where we're going to have to put some of those vents on. We talked a little bit about that last time, because if you have, maybe if there was, for some reason your piece had like some sideways part like this, you can't trap air in the mold like that. You have to give that air, allow that air to escape from the mold. And so that's the thing we want to be a little bit careful of. So first of all, the cup, we got to figure out where the cups are going on all your pieces. We have to figure out if you need like vents out of some of your pieces. And then also, if you have some parts of your projects that are a little thin, we got to figure out like how are we going to make sure that we get everything that we need to with that. So that's the first part of what we're talking about today. And then the second part is actually making the mold itself. We're not going to be mixing up the plaster. We're going to, like I said, we're going to do that all together. But you do need to make a box to contain that. So I think that if I talk through a couple of them, by literally just sort of holding on to the pieces and just describing, sprues and vents and where those might go, that you'll get a sense of that pretty clearly. And like I said, I'm not going to allow you to make mistakes. I don't do that. But let's maybe just talk through, like this is probably one of the easiest ones. So maybe where are you going to put the sprue on this one? Yeah, it's right there. That's sort of a no-brainer, isn't it? Okay, so like right here. Attach it. For illustration purposes, we'll just pretend that this is something like that. All right. So, but what about like this right here? Because technically that would be trapped, wouldn't it? So if we think about that. So the bronze goes down, across, up. And I will tell you this realistically, if you didn't do anything to this, you would get a perfect cast. Like, there's no problem. Because the bronzes will actually force out some of that air. But we always want to try to increase our odds, okay? So what I would do with this one is I would absolutely put that cup right there. And then just a couple little things that come up from here, about the diameter of a piece of chalk, just up to the top of the mold right there. So you have like 1, 2, 3 things to add. This one you're going to be fine with, because that's almost completely horizontal. All this stuff down here, That's gonna be all fine, because that's all dropping down, so it's gonna be great. So that one's pretty easy. Who has another mold for us? Natalie, why don't you grab yours? That big complicated thing, that's gonna be a lot of fun. What's up? Four? The teacher would know that. That's when class ends. So I'm gonna let you hold it. It feels a little fragile. So where are you gonna put the screw in that one? The bottom, absolutely. And when you do that, you want to be a couple things you want to be conscious of. Like when Nate sticks that on there. Another reason that pop bottles work really great as opposed to this is because you remember you're going to be this mold. This is what makes the mold containers in. This is going to be filled with plaster. You're going to take that thing and you're just going to plunge it into plaster like that. So that's not going to work very well. So you want something that's kind of rigid that you can hold on to, and you also want to stick it on there pretty well. So you don't want it to just like, sort of casually like that, okay, I'm done. It's like, no, because once you start to move it, if you bump it or something, it's going to come right off. So like really stick that sucker on there like this, and use some pressure and get your fingers in there and smooth that out. Like get a really, really solid bond between those two. That's not going anywhere. I can take this thing, it's like, that's fine, that's good, just like that. So I can take this thing and I can plunge it. This is not big enough, but it's firm enough so I can like plunge it into. So you're gonna have to do that on the bottom of that, nice and firm. Boy, maybe we shouldn't have started with this one. This one's complicated. So we're gonna take this. Through here. What parts are you not going to get? I think you certainly like this thing right here. You're going to have to do something with that because the metal goes all the way down and then it doesn't want to go back up. That's a little problematic. We're going to do something about it. This is another way to go too. So I just took this. This is a slightly different kind of wax, but it's basically the same. So it is a piece of styrofoam cup, and I just coated it with the wax. So this is like a perfect screw unit right here. So I think what we're going to do with yours, Natalie, I'm going to let you hold it but flip it upside down. I think what you should do is actually like on the side like this. Let this be over to the side, and then connect something like something pretty big, like the diameter of my thumb, like from right there to here, and then just start attaching it at different spots, like right here. You can get down onto this one, so that'll fill that. Like all these little spots where the wax is kind of thin. So you might actually have like eight or so of those things going from here. So the first one at the top should be nice and heavy, but these other ones may be the diameter of your little finger. Just like from here, over here, over here. I'll just let you have this one. But when you do this, like I said, when you stick those on there, like don't. It's not just like that, okay? So really get them on there, so it's firm and quite tough. Same thing when they're sticking on there. You want to be able to be pretty confidently take this thing and just kind of move it around like this. Okay? And again, I'm not going to let you make any mistakes. So get started, go as far as you can. It's going to be a lot of work. It's a couple hours to do all that stuff. Okay? Whenever you want. I'm just saying, at some point, it's going to be more than just, a 10-minute job. Like Nate's is super easy. It's like he's gonna like stick that thing on there, put a couple vents on, go up for a cup of coffee, and you're gonna still be slaving down here, putting all your pieces together. He'll be up with his feet on the table. Who's got something else? So, Ava? I'm not sure, pull yours. One that you might think is you're likely to cast.
I like the last two better.
Okay. Okay, so how are you gonna cast those things? Any ideas?
Legs are gonna be the other one,
Tricky,
so
isn't it?
I don't know if you would have a fat one on the belly and then. I'm not sure. I would have bigger pretzels, hopefully.
Okay. I might be tempted to do, so you have two of them, they're kind of the same, right?
Yeah.
So I would maybe do one, so you've got the cup up here, and then a little shorter screw down the side, and then just attach this on both sides. So you have one on this side, one on this side. Let's maybe come on a little bit closer, folks, so you can see the drawing. So then you got, down here to the artwork, and then one over, same thing. So you have
both cats can be part of
both cats could be the same one. Yep.
Okay,
Yep.
that would be cool.
Yeah, and so you just want to do one, and that'll work well. And these, like if this is thicker, that will help a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're just not going to get them at this thickness right there. So even, I think you got to get these up to, like, well, let me hold that.
Would chalk thickness be enough? I feel like I've seen pretzels out there.
I think those pretzels got to be like that to have a pretty good
Okay.
guarantee. Like if they're like that thick, you got a pretty good guarantee.
So if they're both upright like this,
Mm-hmm.
these feet aren't going to be an issue? Just like
I
this?
think probably what I would do, new drawing. Okay, so that's your sprue. And you got a couple going like that, and a couple going like that.
Oh, okay.
So you got like one from each paw going up to the sprue. So you have 4 on each one, kind of stuck to the sprue.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
What would I do the whole like rod part with? If I got like a bottle, what would this part be?
You can just make it out of wax. You can. We used to have a mold for that around here. Let me look in my office one more time. We used to have like a sprue mold that worked pretty well. The easiest thing to do, and the thing that's the most guarantee of safety that you're going to get it, is just make it out of wax.
Yeah.
So just like make the whole, and it doesn't have to be, perfectly round, but it shouldn't have, it shouldn't be. It shouldn't be like that. It's like it shouldn't have nooks and crannies and stuff. It should be nice and smooth, pretty smooth. No little gaps. No little places where plaster can get in and create problems. So, but this should be, like this is actually a pretty good diameter for it, like right there. This big round maybe is a quarter, like that diameter, coming down. Is that all making sense?
Yeah.
Okay, good. All right, well, and then we'll just see on the pretzels, we'll see what you come up with, and if it looks like we gotta thicken them up, I'll let you know. But like I said, that thickness, I think you should get it.
Okay.
Good. Who else has something for us to take a look at? Why don't you bring your piece over, Kate?
Do I use somebody to fix it? Should I still fix it? You said I had to fix it though.
Just as we talk about how to do it, even if it's not in its perfect state, why don't you bring it over and we'll problem solve. where are you gonna put the sprue on that thing?
On the bottom.
On the bottom. That's sort of a no-brainer, isn't it? Yeah. Anything else we need to be concerned about here? Because we take this thing and you're gonna plunge it like that maybe, or maybe not like that. Okay. So then just, yeah, whatever you do instead of that, but then have the cuff sort of like right there. I think you get everything. I don't see any problems with any of this at all. Well, that was easy. Come on, give me a challenge.
So if you have something like that where it's very, very flat
Mhm.
and open on it, would you have to worry about venting that, or would it still fill?
Let me see that again. Yeah, you know, if we decided to leave that piece of wood on there,
Yeah.
you know, even if you, I mean, honestly, Nate, I mean, this process is so durable. It's never a matter of like, are you going to get it or not? It's the difference between, you know, the kind of decisions we're making now, like adding the little vents, or the difference between getting like a perfect casting and maybe getting a few little gas bubbles in it here and there. So if, you know, in a pinch, you literally could just like, you have the cup, you know, like burn it out and go, and it would be fine. But, you know, like if it was me, if it was my own work, what I would do is I'd put that on here and I'd probably put a couple little vents coming out just to get rid of that gas. So, sorry about that. What else do we need to talk about? Well, why don't you grab one of,
Maddie's.
yes, please, and one of the little figures too.
Oh yeah. Yes, that would be great. Could you grab that one?
I've even had, I think I maybe mentioned this before, I've even had situations where I've melted the bronze and there's been a piece of metal, like steel, in the pot, and the steel just floats on top like a bobber. Like that's how dense the metal is. It's very, very heavy. And so when you pour this stuff in, it just goes absolutely everywhere. And so really, like almost all bronze casting, if you just do like a moderately good job, you're almost going to get everything, you know, because it's such a great metal to work with. So, well, this one's kind of a no-brainer, isn't it? Yeah, it's pretty straightforward. You know, just like the cup on the bottom like this, that's a pretty straightforward drop casting. And you got it. There's really, this is about as simple as it gets. The other one that had the thing spread out a little bit more, you know, the cloth spread out. If you were doing that one, I'd probably put a vent over on the other side, coming up to the top of the level of the top of the cup. So again, about the diameter of this diameter, or maybe even a little bit bigger, just over here that will come up. So that one's pretty easy. For Maddie here, you know, the thing that I would maybe worry about on this one is actually this thing, making sure that this part is stuck on this pretty well, so that when we pour it, the metal will flow, you know, really nicely all the way through here, and then down to the top where you need to get it. So, again, I don't really see this as being, you know, a terribly difficult casting to actually get, because it's pretty straightforward in terms of, you know, where you want the metal to go. Wow, I was sort of hoping for some challenges here, people. Aside from Natalie's, yours is we took all of the complications of the entire class and we put them on your piece.
Yeah,
And yours
way to
is
go.
The most complicated. Yeah, so like whatever you land on, you know, I'm happy to work with you, you know, later too. You can shoot me an email, but in going through this, you know, different possibilities, I think you'll probably kind of figure it out. And like I said, I'm not going to let you make a mistake, so because that really stinks not getting a casting. The next thing we need to be okay. So when you do that, one final thing, as you are attaching, I've emphasized several times making sure that it's firmly stuck on there. That's partly because you're handling the piece a lot, but it's also because you want to minimize the chance for plaster to get into the mold or create. Let's see, a former instructor of mine used to say, you want to create a superhighway, not a dirt road, okay? It's like you get the metal where it needs to go, you know, nice, flat, straight, simple, not any more curves than what you need to get it where it needs to go. So maybe just think in terms of that as a model. And if there's any problems, I'll point them out as we go. So as you are working on these molds, we do have to make containers to put the bronzes in, the plaster molds in, because we'll take these things, we'll mix up the plaster, we'll put the plaster in here, and then, after we're all sort of set, we're gonna take the wax and sort of plunge it into that. And you can see from all of these cardboard masonry casting tubes, we actually reuse these all the time. So this is what we use because they're super easy to adjust in terms of size. So you can just take these and shrink them down, even put a couple of them together, make them a little bit bigger. We have a whole bunch of these here. We have a whole bunch of these under the stairs around the corner. So just grab ones that work for you. The most common mistake that people make when they are putting a container together for the plasters is they make them too big. Because you really only need plaster about 2 inches all the way around your artwork. Okay? So if 2 inches all the way around this, if this is 2 inches, so that's actually not very big, is it? Like this would be okay, but this actually could be a little smaller. So we could take this thing and shrink it down to about like that. That's about right. So don't make them big. That's the other reason that I used to have people make square boxes, but you don't have to. It's just more hassle, and you never use the corners, so we just end up, chewing up a lot of materials that we don't really need. And so I started going to these round ones, and it's way easier. Complicated stuff, isn't it? There we go. That's about right. So you want to be thinking in terms of, casting on the bottom. So a couple inches on the bottom. So this one is actually pretty close. So we got about 2 inches up. We fill this up with plaster right at the top. And we take this, sort of plunge this in. Just right, because we'll have about 2 inches at the bottom too. Okay, does that make sense? So 2 inches all the way around, 2 inches at the bottom. That one you want to be pretty careful about. And like I said, the most common mistake that people make when they do this is making the molds too big. Because you can, you just grab something like this. If you're maybe a little careless or in a rush or maybe not paying attention to the demo or something, and you end up making something like this, for this thing, holy smokes, we're mixing up a lot of plaster, a lot of resources for something you don't really need. You just have to, not only do you have to mix it up and put it in here, but then later on you got to chisel it off and throw it away. So it's better to just have more efficiently sized molds. So the goal with making the tubes for the plasters is you want to make them watertight for plaster for 10 minutes. Okay, so it doesn't have to be like watertight. It just has to be able to hold plaster where it is for about 10 minutes, and you're good. So we got the sides. What are we going to do about the bottom? How are we going to make that? You got an idea, Eleanor?
This work?
That would work. It doesn't even take that. It just takes cardboard.
Cardboard.
So just literally a piece of cardboard. We have big sheets of cardboard like that. I'm guessing, Kathy, that around and the cardboard is under the stairs out there where these things are. Grab me a small piece of cardboard, smallish one, from under the stairs out there, would you? That's just fine. this in. How do you cut that? What's that?
Scissors.
And
Exact-
some. Super easy. That's why, do it in 2 minutes.
I was like, oh.
Machete.
We got all these cool tools. We gotta use them, right?
It's true.
You put that back where it was. Okay.
I don't think that was 2 minutes.
What's that?
I don't think that was 2 minutes.
Okay, so maybe I needed to tell a joke beforehand to chew up that time. So literally just tape that on there. And again, it doesn't take crazy amounts of tape, but the plaster is liquid and there is force there. So you need to, use a fair amount. Like this is not an excessive amount here. The same thing on the bottom, just like all the way around. Get it on there nice and snug. If it doesn't have, it's okay if it's on the sides like this, that's fine. So then you've got that. Okay, so we've got the container, that's great. One of the things that happens when we mix up the plaster, we pour it in, the plaster has a certain sort of, there's a little bit of internal tension, but then when we take this in to the kilns, we heat up this mold to 1100 degrees, there's a lot of internal stress that happens. And because we're drying it out, the molds get, I wouldn't say they get fragile, but they become fractured in certain ways. So what we need to do is to put a little stucco mesh or some lath on the inside of this that will be embedded in the plaster that will hold that mold together in a really strong way. So tape this on. Oh, actually, I'll just go ahead and do this. Back. All of the guys that taught me sculpture, and they were all guys because it was a real guys game back then. Like a lot of those guys, not Stuart, the guy that I was talking about earlier. But if you look around at all those old dogs that are, started teaching in the 60s and 70s. They work with the materials that we're going to be working with on a week from Wednesday. They work with that material, which is a silica flour. It's a ground silica. But they had really lousy working conditions. They were they were often working in basements. Nobody ever thought about ventilation. And all those guys were smokers. And so many of them, this huge percentage of them ended up with lung disease. Because it's the combination of smoking, low-level exposures of the silica flour that we're going to be working with, because it was just always in the studio. It was just always around. There's open bags of it everywhere. You don't see that here, do you? No. And plus these super high concentrated doses, all of that is really, really bad. And so we don't do any of that. But when we do put these molds together, a week from Wednesday, we're going to have some equipment and make sure that we have the proper stuff so that we're not having bad exposures. All right, so I'm just going to cut some mesh. And all you really need is enough mesh to do a loop, about a loop and a half around the inside. Here. You can cut this. There's a couple different tools. This is the one I would recommend. This is, I call it airplane shears. It's really great for cutting this material. Cut it a little bit. This works well for folks that have slightly smaller hands than I do, most women. This works also great too, but it is a little bit more awkward if your hands are smaller. And this is the thing that you folks are gonna do that I'm not gonna do. And that is before you start cutting, you're gonna walk back there and you're gonna get a pair of leather gloves. Okay? I don't do this because I've done this a million times, so I don't cut myself. But if you do this without gloves, you're gonna cut yourself. Just saying. That is the way of the world. Because this edge right here is really sharp. That was my finger. There you go. You're gonna mix up all that plaster. We're gonna dump it in. Bethany's gonna come along. Perfect. That's a perfect mold. Absolutely. So you need to do this on the inside. So Nate, if you were casting all three of those, I'm guessing just because of the configuration of what you have, you probably need to do all three of them separately. Just because they're wide enough, it's like have a single screw, I think that's problematic. I think if Bethany wanted to do like the two smaller ones, she could probably get those on the same sprue, you know, just make a slightly bigger one, or if she just wanted to do one, you know, just do it right there. Okay, so you have to do this. You're not on your own, but you folks have to do this for each of your molds, right? So, questions. Are you ready to do that? What questions do you have to help you get that done?
You want this done by next Wednesday?
A week from Wednesday. That's the absolute deadline, and actually we're gonna shoot for next Monday to have this, like, this part done. So Monday will be sort of a show up with this, I'll check it over, make sure.
With
Okay.
the things attached to our.
Well, so now I'm gonna say two things at once. I would say ideally, yes, but I know there are people here that are gonna change their piece or do something different, okay? So if you have until next Monday to get that done. It would be ideal if you got that done a little ahead of time, but I know realistically that's not gonna happen. So. Good question. Other question?
Do we need to have anything done by Wednesday?
No, I'm still trying to figure out what we're gonna do on Wednesday. I think we'll maybe actually be looking a little bit ahead. Probably, maybe we'll open up the pit, start sorting some of that out and getting that, but, no. It's like between, so Wednesday, we're gonna like be fooling around with the pit, getting all of that ready, but also like a problem-solving session here, just to give you support. Next Monday, make sure everything's done, and then a week from Wednesday, we're gonna be investing. So we've got some time in there. Good. Other questions? The cardboard, these tubes, the cardboard, 4 minutes ago. And also this mesh it's all out under the stairs. You don't have to ask permission, you can just go grab it, bring it in, and use it as you need to. All right, we're done. Hang around if you got questions, otherwise we'll see you next week, or on Monday, or Wednesday.